Welcome back to the Big Grief Podcast. Today's episode is a very special one, very important topic, and that is the topic of suicide and grief. We also get into mental health discussion and the importance of mental health awareness. And I'm very, very fortunate to be able to conduct this episode with a very good friend of mine. Her name is Ciciley Hoffman, and she'll introduce herself at the beginning of the podcast. We have a really great discussion. This episode is going to be about an hour long. So it's a supersized episode, about twice as long as our usual episodes. And it will be a two-parter. Part 2 will be next week. But I did want to give just a little content warning before this episode, because we do speak a lot about suicide, about friends, family members who we have lost to suicide, and the issues, situations, mental health, and the awareness around suicide. So I wanted to be sure and give that content warning, trigger warning about that for anyone who may be listening, that we do talk quite a bit about the subject of suicide. But I hope that this topic will be beneficial to someone. I hope that it is informative. We're very open in our conversation, and I just hope that this openness and vulnerability will be beneficial to someone out there. If you are struggling with mental health or with thoughts of suicide, please reach out. The Suicide and Crisis Hotline number changed in recent years. It is now just the number 988. It's kind of like 911, except it is 988. You can call that number. You can text that number 24/7, 365. Someone is always there. You can also log on to 988lifeline.org, and you can also chat with a volunteer, a counselor, someone on the other end. So if you don't like to talk on the phone, if you don't want to text, log on to 988lifeline.org, and someone will be there to talk to you, because we want you here. We want you here. So if you're struggling, loneliness, whatever it is, please reach out. So let's get into today's episode with Ciciley Hoffman. Anyway. Hi, Ciciley.
Hi, friend.
So I know you, but for anybody listening who doesn't know you, tell them who you are and what you do and what a lovely person you are.
Well, I am Ciciley Hoffman. I'm a costume designer and wardrobe stylist for film and television. I'm an image consultant for high-profile folks, and I'm a cat lady, and I'm your friend. And we've known each other for...
I was trying to think. It's like 11 or 12 years. Yeah, minimum. So
I don't even remember how we met, actually. Sure it was on a movie.
I think it was through Motkey.
Yeah, definitely.
Through one of Motkey's films. I don't know if it was Contrary or if it was something before. I feel like it was before Contrary, but I can't remember. Contrary to Lightness, if anybody wants to look up a great little
good one. That got us to the Cannes Film Festival, so we like that one. That one was pretty solid, yeah.
That film also got us, before Cannes, it got us to LA, which was one of the best trips I've ever taken.
Yes, that was great.
That was such a good trip with all of you.
That was a good trip, except for that one seagull, that gray seagull that made me fall in the ocean.
That I have pictures of.
Yes, and we will not be sharing those with the general public.
That was amazing.
That was fun.
Ciciley tried to... Did you try to pet the seagull or chase? Or
I'm chasing him? He was the only gray one, so I decided that I wanted to chase him. And you have to understand that this is a biological need. Okay, my big brother has chased birds my entire life. He stepped on a pigeon in Czechoslovakia and caught a pigeon in Washington, D.C. Who catches a pigeon? So this one seagull was the only one that was gray, and I decided that I needed to catch him. It was like a drive within me.
Just remember looking over and just being like, what is Ciciley doing?
Chasing him.
She's chasing a pigeon.
and wiped out into the ocean.
Smack on your
Yes.
face.
Yes.
Amazing.
It was good. It was quality. I'm glad that it was observed by others. Yeah.
I forget who said it. Somebody looked over and they're like, what's Ciciley doing at that bird? It's great. Anyway. Oh, good times. So you actually messaged me
Mhm.
and said, hey, can we talk about this sometime? And what you wanted to talk about is something that, unfortunately, you and I both know a little bit about, and that is suicide. Because we both have lost people to suicide, including friends in the film industry.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about why you thought this was so important to talk about.
Well, I know you've been doing this podcast and talking about grief, and you and I also both share the loss of a parent. Uh, my stepmother died about 3 years ago, and one of our friends, our mutual friends, is one of the people we've both lost to suicide, Brittany Belland. And I think it's important to talk about it for two reasons. Number one, I will take any opportunity I get to talk about my friends who have died by suicide. Uh, it's not the same as my friends who have died in motorcycle accidents, car accidents, my friends who died of COVID. I've lost a lot of people in my life, unfortunately. And other than old age, the largest group of them have died by suicide. And I think it's important to talk about it full stop. Because the thing about suicide is nobody talks. So not only does it give me an opportunity to talk about Brittany and Carter and my other friends, I've lost two friends to suicide in the last year, just about the last year. Carter committed suicide last March. And then I had another friend who committed suicide in 2024. And nobody talks about it. And it's so shamed and stigmatized when it's something that everybody's thought about. Everybody's thought about it. I don't care who you are. I don't care how happy your life is. I don't care how successful you are, how much money you have, how many friends you have. Everyone has had a moment, at least a moment where they thought about it. And the fact that we don't talk about it is infuriating to me because it's the only way that we're going to prevent. It's the only way. And the fact that even one of my friends who committed suicide, their family will not publicly state what happened. And it's not my place to do it for them because that person was my friend. That person was not my family. I am not that person's parent. But the fact that their family doesn't see the opportunity to prevent it from happening to another family is infuriating to me. And I understand that other people's pain is other people's pain. And the way that they handle that, you and Dave talked about this, about your grief is your grief. And as much as I can know what my grief feels like, and I know what grief as a general abstract feels like, I don't know what your grief feels like.
Right.
And I don't know what those parents are going through, especially because I don't have a child. I can't imagine having a child do this. You know, that's just, it's mind to me. So, and there's no timeline. You talked a lot about this. You talked about this with your friend who lost her husband in the war. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name.
Heather, yeah.
Yeah, that she lost him 18 years ago, and it still backs up on her. Of course it does, because there's no timeline, and people seem to think that there's, you do this thing, then you do the next thing, then you do the next thing. It doesn't work like that. You can get to the third thing and get knocked back to zero real quick. And it might be the stupidest thing in the world. I will tell you what, my friend James Workman from Texas died, I guess, like 5 years ago now. And he he was basically betrayed by his body. He was not a very healthy person. But his wife is a nurse, and he woke up and said, "I can't breathe," in the middle of the night. And she called 911, and she worked on him, and the EMS came and they worked on him, and they couldn't save him, and he died. But he loved McRibs. Look, I know, just vile. He loved McRibs. And anytime, they have them seasonally, apparently.
Mhm.
And anytime he would get a McRib, I want you to know this man would take a picture of it and text it to me because he knew that I would just be mortified. And I'd be like, dude, don't eat that. You're on dialysis, man. Do you know how much salt is in that? Like, what are you doing? And he'd be like, take it out. It's just to bug me.
Yeah.
And I guess like last year, I mean, after he had been gone for a number of years, there was on the marquee at the McDonald's, it said McRib is back. And I'm sitting in traffic and I see that and I burst into tears because of a stupid McRib. Like, you never know. You never know. And I think especially with suicide, because there are always more questions than answers with suicide, even if the person leaves a note.
Mhm.
That idea of a linear grief is completely disrupted when somebody takes their own life.
Well, you start questioning yourself. What did I miss? And you start going back
Right.
because it's such an acute and traumatic, it's such a traumatic thing. And it's such a sudden thing. It's not like, with my parents who had cancer and we watched them and we had that anticipatory grief. This is more, you're in the realm of complicated grief because everything surrounding the situation is complicated. There's no one right answer. There's no, you want an explanation, but you can't. You're not going to get it.
Right. And when I think about like my stepmother dying or even James dying or Corey, my friend who died of COVID, I know why they died.
Mm-hmm.
I know why they died. I don't know why Carter died. I don't know why Brittany died. And that not knowing
Mhm.
will drive you absolutely mad because you're never going to get an answer. And even if you did, that's the other thing about suicide. Even if you did, if I could talk to Brittany and she explained to me, well, this is why I did it. Like I thought about this and I got to this point and this is why I did it. That's not good enough. It's not good enough. I don't know what that would be, but it doesn't matter because whatever it is, it's not good enough. It's never going to be good enough because it still results in she's not here. She was in her late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
She's not here. And unfortunately, suicide has basically always been a part of my life. Like I said, I've lost a lot of people, and part of that stigma was ingrained in me in the 4th grade when I was in Catholic school. My family not Catholic, but I went to Catholic school because it was the closest school and it was a better school than the public school. Our PE teacher killed himself, and there was a parish attached to the school. And I want you to know that these church leaders and school leaders told a group of 9-year-olds that Mr. Goad would burn in hell forever for having committed a mortal sin, and that we should pray for his soul, for his suffering in hell to be eased as much as possible, but that really we should just not ever do such a thing ourselves. And I remember telling my mom that and her saying, that's just not true. Like that's not true. That's not what we believe. I grew up in a Presbyterian household and that is not what they teach.
That's also a lot to put on a 9-year-old.
Oh my God. Like a whole room of us. I'm like,
That's heavy for a 9-year-old.
that's heavy for anybody, let alone a child. And the older I get, when I think about that, the more I realize how forked up that was to put that on children and to instill fear in children. And that fear is why people don't talk about it. And again, not talking about it is part of why more people do it.
And there was a much better way to say, hey, we know this might upset you. If there's anyone who wants to talk about this,
Yeah,
or
there was
talk about what you're going through, what you're feeling.
Yeah, no, none of that. None of that. And it's wild to me because two of my friends who have committed suicide, I had a conversation with them about that happening. And the fact that it still turned out that way. I will chase that tail for the rest of my life. And part of it too is I think we have to admit to ourselves we are powerless when it comes to somebody else making this decision. There's nothing that I did or did not do. There's nothing that I could have done or could not have done. That really came down to it in the end, with the exception of it being societally acceptable to talk about it. Because if you ever say to somebody, hey, I'm having suicidal ideation, that causes a panic in the other person. And I had a friend who said that to me one time, and I called 911 immediately. Like, went into the other room, got my boyfriend at the time's phone and called 911, and had my friend who was saying they were having suicidal ideation on mute and called 911 and sent an ambulance to his house. And he was furious with me. We're not friends anymore. He was furious with me.
But is he alive?
Yes. And I will stand by that decision.
I don't blame you.
And part of it's not only having the conversation with others, it's having the conversation with ourselves of knowing if you get to that point, because there is a point, there's an edge. And some people are on one side of the edge, and unfortunately, some others are on the other side of the edge. And if you don't talk about it and you don't have a plan, that's my thing is I think that when people decide to cross that edge, they didn't have a plan. There needs to be in place. If I get to this edge, I call this person. I tell this person or that person or whatever. And unfortunately, not even that always works. Because like I said, I had the conversation with two of my friends who have killed themselves about Mr. Go, the PE teacher himself, and said, hey, call me. I don't care what time it is. I don't care what you're going through. I'm not going to judge you for this. I just want you here.
Yeah.
I just want you here. And whatever the rest of it is, we'll fix it. We'll work it out. Problems get fixed. This too shall pass.
Right.
Because it becomes a permanent solution to a temporary problem. No matter what the problem is, I guarantee you the problem is temporary. And somebody wants you here. Even if it's just me. I want you here. I don't care who you are. I want, all of my neighbors, all of my friends, people I don't know. There's a short list of politicians who I really wouldn't mind. But that aside, so all that to say, that's why I wanted to come on here and talk to you about this. Because it needs to be discussed and it needs to be said and it needs to be treated completely differently from the way that we treat it. Because, like I said, when you say to somebody, I'm having suicidal ideation, the fact that that results in a panic from the other person is not helpful. And part of the reason I think that it results in a panic is because the other person doesn't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. And they don't know what to do and they don't know what to say because we never talk about it. Because they're never told, hey, if somebody ever says this to you, this is what you should do. This is what you should say. This is how we deal with this. People don't know what to do. They just hear this person might check out.
Right.
And then they scramble. And that's not That's not a plan. That's not helpful. It doesn't do anything. It just puts this like massive pink elephant out there. And then you're like, well, great. And I'm not a mental health professional. I was raised by a mental health professional, but I am not a mental health professional. And I do know that if somebody says that to you, that is what you do. You get a mental health professional immediately. And the great thing is now there's all kinds of like online therapy that you can do, and you can get somebody to help you today. You can also, if you have to, you can go to an emergency room. Emergency rooms have social workers on staff. They have to. There is somebody you can talk to. And there is somebody who can give you perspective of whatever the temporary problem, and that the permanent solution is not the solution.
And there's also, and I'll put this out on socials and everything, there's also the suicide prevention hotline. The number changed in like 2022. It was a few years ago.
988.
988. Yeah. And you can call that number. You can text that number. You can also go online to, is it 988lifeline.org? And you can actually just chat, just do a virtual chat with a counselor, with, somebody that can help, which I think is so great this day and age because people don't necessarily like want to talk on the phone. But you said something about mental health, and I think the two are connected.
Absolutely.
We don't talk about, and it's gaining more traction talking about mental health. And honestly, a lot of celebrities have helped with that in getting the conversation going. Like one of my favorites is Zachary Levi, and what they do like over at Nerd HQ is they talk a lot about mental health and just getting help. And like you say, just talking to somebody. But I think, I don't know how you did this in school, but when I was in like, was it middle school? Was it like 7th grade? And we had, when they started telling us about, the difference between boys and girls, and it was like a health class, but it wasn't a health class, or, and they showed us like the birthing video and that stuff. You remember, did you go through that? Because I know I was traumatized by that.
I actually corrected our teacher. There were 2 times in my life that I have really tried to correct a teacher. One, my mother thinks this is hilarious. One was in Catholic school in the 1st grade. I was 6, and we were learning the Hail Mary, which for those non-Catholics is, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus." And I stuck my little paw up and said, "Miss Sullivan, it's not a womb, it's a uterus." Which, I mean, I'm not wrong, but and
Technically, you're not wrong.
the second time was in health class when I corrected the teacher on the fact that the vagina and the vulva are different areas. And she was not happy.
Again, technically correct.
I was correct. She was spreading misinformation, Alison.
Fake news.
But yes, I went through that as well.
I think maybe not 7th grade, but we had another, I don't know, it was like freshman year of high school or something. They would always like, it was like different years growing up, they would throw these health classes at us. Teach us about STDs, all that stuff. Never taught us how to do taxes, but
right,
that type of stuff. But I think that it should start in middle school, high school, talking to kids, teaching kids about mental health, especially, going through puberty. Come on.
Oh, God.
And, but saying, hey, because there was someone, and I did not know this kid very well at all. I'm sad to say, but there were also like over 200 people in my graduating class. But my senior year of high school, a kid in my class killed himself. And it's one of those things where I think like nobody really knew what to say. Again, nobody had talked about it. This was the 90s. Nobody It was just like, oh, this kid died. Now, a ton of people showed up to his funeral. We all went to his funeral. A ton of people showed up. Nobody talked about it afterwards. Never mentioned again. But I did not know this kid, but I think that it's important to teach kids about, hey, if a friend says something like this, if a person says this, what are some signs that you can look for? What should you do? Like you say, what should you do? What is a number that you can call or you can text or you can, chat, whatever? Because yeah, nobody knows what to do. Kids don't know what to do. Adults don't know what to do.
And it's also, teaching kids, if you feel this way, speak up.
Right.
You are not the first person who has felt this way. You will not be the last person who has felt this way.
Nobody's going to judge you for feeling like this.
No. Speak up. I mean, we teach kids, if you fall off the jungle gym and break your arm, we teach kids to go to the nurse and go, hey, Nurse Ratchet, I think I broke my arm.
Right.
We don't teach anybody to say, part of my heart is broken. Part of my brain is broken. And there are things we can do to help that. There's therapy. There's medication. I am all about better living through chemistry. If your brain doesn't produce a chemical that regulates you and keeps you healthy, they will sell it to you. But you have to ask for it. You have to tell somebody that you need it. And we don't teach people that.
Mm-mm.
And I think it's, y'all have talked a lot about how we don't talk about grief at all, let alone grief from a death by suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is because as much as it's not linear, there is kind of a path of grief when you lose a parent, a grandparent, a friend, even if it's sudden, even if it's like my friend David, who died in a motorcycle accident, my friend Tamika, who died in a car accident. Like that was very sudden. They were both very young. But there's a path of, okay, I know what happened. I know how it happened. I know why. So we're going to move through the grief, even though there's going to be setbacks, there's going to be resets, all that stuff. When someone kills themselves, there's such a greater range of emotional response to that death. A lot of people get very angry at the person. And while I think that is valid, that emotion is valid, I think people forget that anger is a secondary emotion. You are angry because you are hurt, because you're scared, because you're vulnerable, because you're... Anger doesn't exist in a vacuum. It just doesn't. We're not built that way. And people don't get underneath it to deal with the part that's causing them to be angry. And a lot of people treat the person who has done this as though they are selfish. That infuriates me because it indicates a fundamental lack of understanding of why people take their own lives. They never take their own lives as a selfish act. That is not a thing. Not one single person who has ever taken their own life did it out of selfishness. They think they're solving a problem. They think they are fixing it. They think they're making it better for you and for me. That's what they think. They don't think, I'm going to do this for me. And if you put that to any sort of litmus test, it doesn't hold up. If you actually really think about that and break down, okay, this person is doing this for selfish reasons, it doesn't hold water. It makes no sense whatsoever. The only reason that people do it is because they think it is the right answer. And whether that is because of their mental health, I know Brittany struggled with her mental health, Carter struggled with her mental health. I have another friend who struggled with addiction issues, which can result in depression, which can absolutely tell you that this is the right answer. There are all kinds of mental health issues that can tell you that this is the right answer. And those can come on acutely or they can be chronic, like they were in Carter's case and Brittany's case. And I'm not talking out of school by saying that, because they both were very vocal about their struggles with their mental. That idea is a liar. And the person who takes their own life has not understood that that is a lie. That's what
and it's not just that that's the right answer. It's that there are no other answers. There are no other possible answers.
Nothing else.
This is the only thing I can do to correct this. You know, I remember when you called me to tell me about Brittany, and I just remember what you told me, and I remember my brain just trying to go, what? Like my brain could not quite, and even though, like you say, we had known about Brittany's struggles for a while, but even still getting the phone call about it, I was like, no. I was like, you must have heard wrong. There's no possible way, because I think I told you this maybe at the time, or when we had like our little memorial service for her. I had just talked to Brittany like a month before she died, because I was doing a lot of photography at the time, and I had posted this photo, and she texted me and she's like, hey, this photo really speaks to me. She's like, I love it. Can you send me a copy of it framed? She's like, I'll pay for everything, shipping. And I was like, absolutely. I was like, whatever you need, I'll send it to you. I was like, just send me your address. And I never heard back from her. And
one of my friends who did it, I heard from that person 4 days before they did it. And the last text that I got from them said, I love you. And I will keep that forever. I've taken a screenshot of it and emailed it to myself so that it's in the cloud and will never go away and all that stuff. And
yeah,
the last time I had talked to Carter, Carter lived in New York, and I had gone up there and I saw him, and we went to this, there's this place in New York that's like the big gay ice cream shop. It's something like that. It's gay is in the title. I can't remember. And
it's actually called the gay ice cream. Okay.
And it's big gay ice cream or the gay ice cream or something like that. It didn't taste particularly gay to me, but what are you going to do? And I hadn't seen him in a long time when the last time that I saw him, and he was doing better. He had gotten some of his medication regulated and he was doing better. And Carter was a friend from college. So, he killed himself last year. I had known Carter for 24 years.
Yeah.
And I think he and everyone I know who did it, like I said, they don't have a plan, and that's a big thing in the addiction world is having a plan. If you think you're going to use, you have a plan of, okay, I think I'm going to use. That means I immediately do these things, take myself out of the situation, call this person, like your sponsor or your person or whatever. You have a plan of, if I feel this way, then I do this thing, then I do this thing, then I do this thing. And by the time I do these things that I'm supposed to do, I will have gotten myself out of that situation. I will have gotten myself out of that set of feelings. We don't talk about that for mental health and for suicidal ideation. And that frustrates me because it's so easy to have a plan. I feel like this is what I need to do. And it, text 988, call 988 if you are not averse to being on the phone. It's amazing how much just talking to another person and getting it out of this insular world of yourself. I read something the other day about how keeping secrets is so detrimental to you physically. It causes high blood pressure. There's some research that it potentially causes cancer. It eats you from the inside out. And there's teeny little things that you can do to better your mental health. There's this great website. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called Post Secret. Have you ever seen this? So every Sunday, I read them this morning, in fact, before we had this conversation. Every Sunday, this guy named Frank in California posts secrets that are mostly written on postcards and sometimes on other things, that people mail to him anonymously.
Yeah.
So on one side, it's, whatever the image is of the postcard. And on the other side, people write their secrets. And some of them are funny. Some of them are stupid and ridiculous. Like, I hate the way my husband loads the dishwasher, and I can't tell him because he'll be deeply hurt or something like that.
And all anonymous, I'm
Yes.
assuming.
Yes. And then a lot of them are about suicide and
Yeah.
suicidal ideation. A lot of them are, this almost put me over the edge. And he has a lot of resources that's listed on the website. Like, if you're feeling this way, these are resources in your area. The 988, of course. Also the Rape and Incest National Network, RAINN. It's RAINN.org. They also have a call line that's helpful, and Frank has that on there. And then there's like a, I guess it's a Reddit thread or group or whatever. I don't know what the kids are doing these days. And there's Facebook groups that surround Post Secret where people talk about the postcards, and there's an overwhelming feeling of community and that you're not alone. Because when it all comes down to it, when people take their own lives, 9 times out of 10, loneliness is a factor. Being alone and being insulated, and internally insulated, that is such a huge factor in whether or not people choose to take their own lives. So when you are alone and insulated, or you feel that way, because I know for a fact, everyone I know who has committed suicide was not alone, in the sense that they had friends, family, spouses, work friends, people who depended on them, people they depended on, but they felt alone.
It's interesting that you say that, because what I immediately thought of was high profile people who have died by suicide, and you kind of can't imagine or understand why a celebrity would. I mean, and that's a whole other type of grief. That's when you get into like the collective grief and mourning, because but like Robin Williams. I think the first celebrity that I really remembered was Jonathan Brandis. I don't know if you remember Jonathan Brandis.
I had a big crush on him. He was
Me too.
What was it, Star or something?
So he was in Sequest.
West. That's the guy.
With Roy Schneider.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, he cute as a button.
I had a poster of him in my bathroom. But when I heard, it was 2003 when he died. When I heard about it, I was devastated.
Yeah.
And same with Robin Williams.
Robin Williams is the one that still affects me to this day.
Yeah.
Of a person I don't know. I never met him.
Same.
And especially because, they've come out and said that he most likely did it because he believed that he had Lewy body dementia. Or reports that he was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. That is not possible. You cannot be diagnosed with Lewy body dementia until you have passed away. And I know that because my Uncle Jimmy died of Lewy body.
Because they have to examine the brain.
You have to
correct?
examine the brain and see your Lewy bodies in the brain. Like, they
Yeah.
build up in your brain, and and they can't do that when you're alive.
Yeah. Did he suffer with just depression anyway, though?
Depressing,
Probably.
and was potentially going into Lewy body dementia, which is basically Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease mixed together. It's horrible.
Yeah, awful.
And I remember when I found that out, and I thought a lot about Uncle Jimmy and about his decline and how terrifying it was. And it just made Robin Williams' suicide all the much worse for me. as a person who had dealt with that and a person who just loved him so much, as much as you can someone you don't actually know.
Right.
Um,
Well, I mean, he brought so much joy to people through his
Mhm.
roles, but then to know how much he was suffering in real life.
And that's part of it, is that when we don't talk about mental health, when we don't talk to each other, like my oldest girlfriend in the whole world, Jess is 8 hours younger than I am. Literally, we have the same birthday. She's 8 hours younger than I am, and I am gonna die 8 hours before Jess so she can see how she likes it. But that's another thing. She's the one who told me that Robin Williams had killed himself. And she and I will just check in on each other and say, "Hey buddy, how's your mental health?" Not how are you, not how's it going? What are the kids up to? What was work like today? How is your mental health? How is your spirit? And the fact that that's not a common thing that people do.
Right.
And that check-in can literally save lives. I believe that deeply. That somebody saying to you, "How's your spirit, friend? How's your mental health?" And causing a person to actually consider it. Because the thing is, with mental health issues, we get used to being depressed. We get used to having suicidal ideation. Like, that just becomes a norm. And then we don't think to say anything to anybody about it because it's just baseline.
You also don't want to be a burden to anybody.
Right. And when somebody asks you, that gives you space to answer the question, to actually consider it. And then this person has given me this space where I can walk in and I can answer this question with honesty. And you're answering the question for yourself as well as the person who asked you. And that's massive. That's massive.
Mhm.
And the reason that Jess and I do that is because both of our mothers are social workers. Like, we were
So,
raised by mental health professionals.
right.
We know what that can do for a person. But the fact that we're not taught to do that, that's not really seen as socially acceptable.
Right.
Even though people are, standing in line at the post office, "Hey, how you doing?" People ask strangers that all the time, especially in the South. You know, "How you doing? How's your mom and them?" All that stuff. And you don't know this person from Adam's house cat. But I know that Aunt Barbara's having surgery next week.
And if you live in a small town, everybody knows.
Oh, Lord.
I know more about people than I want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know the things I do know.
I'm sure you overhear things that you're like, "No, I didn't know Mrs. Kravitz was up to that kind of shenanigan."
Telling you what, and men gossip more than women. I'll get a lot of flack for that, but men gossip. Working with all men, trust me, men gossip way more. But I digress. I also want to say to you, and I feel like you and I have, that this has come up more, not just since my parents died, but also since COVID and just, the way of the world the last few years. You have encouraged me and allowed space for me to be like, hey, if I even have that first thought of this is a hard day, that you are just like, hey, just text me that. Just tell somebody, hey, I'm not doing okay today. I'm having a hard day today.
And here's the thing, just by doing that, just by sending me that text,
Right.
even if I take a while to answer or don't answer, well, I always know, but until you get that picture of my cat that is coming,
Right.
how much better do you feel having just sent the text?
Yeah. Just getting it out. It's like a weight has been lifted.
Yes.
Like, okay, somebody knows.
Somebody knows.
Somebody else knows that this is a rough day for me. And it's like having somebody else there to sort of walk with you through the day.
Right.
And then it's not as difficult. It's not as hard to go through that day or to go whatever. It's a whole lot easier to just sort of breathe.
Right. And we're to keep so much inside. And to an extent, I get that because I am an extremely private person. I am with people I don't know. And part of that is because of the industry that I work in and because of my past experience as a personal assistant, where I couldn't tell anybody anything ever. So
Right.
I'm still very protective of those folks and my involvement with those folks and myself in that scenario, which leaches over into the way that I move through the world. I'm also
Right.
very protective of my image consultant clients. A lot of them are high profile and don't want anybody to know that they're using an image consultant. That's a different conversation, but I am massively protective of
Mm.
people's privacy and my own privacy. I don't tell people where I live. I don't tell people where I go.
Right.
Anytime I post on social media about a project that I'm working on, I never post about a project while I'm on the project
Okay.
ever, because I don't want anybody to know where I am. And that translates in general to keeping the way that you feel inside. I don't do that with close friends because I know what it potentially leads to. And women, especially, are taught if you have any kind of emotion that you're hysterical. And men are taught that if you have any kind of emotion, you're weak. So that causes all of us, and I know gender is a social construct, and there are people who don't fall under either of those umbrellas, but human beings are taught don't be a burden, don't make waves, especially when it comes to the stuff that we don't talk about. And the stuff that we don't talk about is mental health, suicide, and how we feel. And just that simple act of, I'm not having a good day today.
Mhm.
Just saying that gets it out of you.
Mhm.
And I personally think that's the biggest thing is get it out of you. And we have pathways to getting like stress out of us and anger out of us. People work out or they box or they do all of these things. They scream into a pillow, for God's sake. You know, we have all of these things where these are acceptable expressions of these types of feelings. But those other feelings, keep it to yourself. Keep it to yourself. Don't rock the boat. Don't be a burden.
Right.
And the idea that someone telling you, I'm having suicidal ideation, I'm having a really bad time, that makes them a burden, that is so forked up. It doesn't make you a burden. It makes you a human being who needs some help right now.
I don't know how it was for you growing up. For me, I was and look, as wonderful as my parents were, they did not know how to deal with anything like this
Mhm.
because there were so many times as a kid I and I'll say this. Yes, I'm the youngest of my siblings, but my brother and sister were so much older than me that I grew up more like an only child.
Right.
I mean, by the time I was 8 years old, my brother and sister had moved out and had graduated high school. So from the time I was 8 until high school, I was in the house, by myself with my parents. And you don't know how many times each of my parents said to me if I was going through something or dealing with something, school, whatever, well, just deal with it.
Mhm.
Just deal with it. But you know what we're never taught to do? How to deal with it.
To deal with it. Yeah. It's like, love could do that if you
It's
would.
like, but at the same time, my parents hated crying,
Mm.
hated crying. I would get punished for crying. This is gonna make me emotional, but since it's gonna make me cry. Um,
Well, you're not going to get in trouble with me.
but I would get in so much trouble for crying as a kid. I remember I was 9 years old and my grandmother died. And look, I know looking back now, they didn't know how to deal with things. They didn't know how to process it. I'm not blaming them. Yeah, I'm not blaming them. This is how they were raised. Um, but I remember my grandmother who had cancer, we had just been to see her the night before in the hospital. And I remember leaning across her bed, giving her a hug. And we left, we came home. I had school the next day. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, this is that same night, at 1 o'clock in the morning, my mom came in my bedroom, didn't turn the light on. She stood in the doorway and she said, Alison, grandma died. And I remember waking up and being like, what? Like, and again, trying, like when you called me about Brittany, trying to process, because I'm like, no, I just talked to her. Like, what? And my mom never came to my bedside, never did anything else. She turned, left the room, and that was that. And I had to, 7 hours later, I had to go to school.
Oh, God.
And that was, again, I was not allowed to cry. I was not allowed to show emotion. I was not allowed to be upset. And, I dealt with that for a long time because she was my only grandmother. I never knew my mom's mom. She passed away when my mom was a kid. So this was my only grandmother. And I was like, whose house I was at every afternoon. And, trying to deal with that even so many years later. And the same with my mom when she died, and my dad wouldn't let me express any emotion or talk about mom.
Yeah, he would talk about her, but he wouldn't let you.
Right. And so then trying to deal with that takes you talk about taking a toll on your mental health. It was after my dad died. By the way, today, as of right now, my dad died 5 years ago today.
I saw that on your Facebook, and I have a picture of you and your dad saved in my phone because I love it so much. You're about maybe 4, and
Yeah.
he's got you like this.
Oh, holding me? Yeah, I was about 3 or 4. Yeah.
You're throwing your head back and laughing, and I think he's tickling you.
Yeah.
And it's just the most delightful photograph. I love that picture.
Yeah.
Totally like swiped it off your Facebook like 5 years ago. Yep.
I think actually my brother took that picture and my mom had it framed and sitting on top of our big cabinet TV.
Yeah.
The old tube TVs. Be on top of our big cabinet TV for
Yeah.
years throughout the 80s and 90s.
Still
But-
work, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like trying to, like it was after my dad died that it's like my cumulative grief of everything because Brittany died not long after my mom died. But before my dad died. And trying to, like, I just had so much grief that had just piled up and I hadn't dealt with it. And that's when I was like, I've got to talk to somebody.
But that's why we have to talk about it. That's the thing. Is like your
Right.
parents didn't tell you how to deal with it because they didn't know.
Right.
Nobody taught it. And especially their generation, get out. They don't talk about anything. My stepmother had surgery for her lung cancer and did not tell us until it was over. And my brother and I were livid. We were like, what if something happened? What if you died on the operating table? Don't you think that maybe we would have liked to have known? Don't you think maybe there was something we would have liked to have said to you about this? And it was partially because she was so private, but also partially that insular nature that we're talking about and that people have been taught to do over and over and over and over. And the only way out of that is through talking about it. That's the only way out of that. And I think a lot about, I'm one of those people who like absolutely deep dives into stuff. So like I'm back on the JFK assassination right now. But dude, that's wild. But when I've had people commit suicide, I look into the numbers of suicide and the facts of suicide and like how people do it. And a big part of it is that men overwhelmingly kill themselves more than women do. But they don't make as many attempts. Yeah. Men decide that they're going to do it and they do it. and they do it with a method that gets it done, for lack of a term. And women tend to do things that are potentially reversible, shall we say. And I think part of that, again, gender is a social construct, and there are people who don't fall under either of those umbrellas, but we are taught certain ways of being. And when that way of being runs up against a mental health problem, and people don't know how to deal with it because their parents didn't know how to deal with it, because their parents didn't know how to deal with it, because nobody taught them and nobody talks about it, that results in people taking their own lives, period. And again, I know I'm like beating a dead horse, forgive the expression. The only way to deal with it is to talk about it and to make it safe to talk about it, to have space to talk about it. Because that's the other thing, is I think there's probably a lot of people who would talk about it, who want to talk about it. They all need to talk about it, obviously, but they don't know how. They don't know where to do that. Where is it safe for me to do that? Who is a safe person for me to do that? And that's why I wanted to talk to you about this today, because it's so important. And it's not only important to me because I've lost so many people this way. I don't want to lose anybody else.